Greetings ladies and gentlefish, and welcome back to another tank review. This time we are taking a look at the Tier 9 Soviet tank destroyer, the Object 704. This is not a paper design tank. An example of this was actually built and can be found in, I want to say, the Kubinka Tank Museum, though I could be wrong. It might be a different museum, but either way, the machine did exist. This was essentially made by combining aspects of the IS-2 and IS-3 tanks, and was kind of a development of the ISU-152. The ISU-152, of course, had been put together as a heavy assault gun, among other things. And the real advantages offered by the Object 704 compared to the ISU was increased protection for the crew. The armour was noticeably better, and the armour plates that it had were at a greater angle, so it was more capable of bouncing incoming enemy fire. However, the downside of the tank was that in the end the slightly different configuration of the machine led to firing the gun as a task involving more work for the crew than had been the case with the ISU-152. And so as a result, whilst a prototype of this machine was built, the tank itself was not actually put into full-scale production. So it just became well, a prototype, a test bed vehicle. And the proposal itself was, or the Object 704 design itself, was in the latter stages of the Second World War anyway. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that the necessity for the machine died away per se. Of course, towards the end of the Second World War, hostilities between the Western and Eastern Allies, in particular between the Soviet Union and, on the other side, predominantly France, the United States and Britain. Those hostilities had heightened, trust between the two just wasn't there, but nonetheless the war was coming to an end, and ultimately it was decided not to go ahead with full-scale production of the Object 704. Nonetheless, what is it that we have in the game? Well, as you might expect from a machine that was, or that comes from, the ISU-152, it packs a dirty, great big gun. And most of the differences between this tank at Tier 9 and the ISU-152 at Tier 8 are relating to the platform itself rather than the gun per se, so increased armour protection and increased health. Speaking of which, let's just have a look at what it is you actually get. We're going to talk about the gun selection more in a moment, so we're not going to dwell on this for now. Worth noting though that the tank does get 6 degrees of gun depression, which, whilst not absolutely fantastic, is good enough that it's not a massive hindrance. In terms of survivability, 1600 hit points is a good old slug of health, especially when you consider that a lot of tank destroyers around about Tier 8 only get about 1000 hit points. The ISU was recently changed so that it has 1200, but even so, that's a fairly significant increase in hit point pool. Armour wise, we're going to talk more about this later on as well, but 60 on the rear of the hull nominally, 90 on the sides and 120 on the front, which could be quite good depending on the sloping, which definitely does exist, but as I mentioned, we will talk about that more later on. In terms of mobility, well, you've got a sort of 50-ish ton tank with a 700 horsepower engine, giving you a specific power of around about 14 horsepower per ton, which is not bad. It's in the sort of fast heavy tank sort of territory, slow medium, that sort of ballpark. 37 km/h speed limit going forwards, 13 in reverse, traverse speed of 24.56 degrees per second, though of course bear in mind the real traverse speed is a combination of a variety of things. And in practice, the mobility of this machine, it feels like the mobility you'd find on a fast, heavy tank. Traverse speed can be annoying sometimes, it's not the fastest to turn, but overall the mobility on this tank is not bad. The armour is also not bad, in case that wasn't explicitly obvious, though as I say I will talk more about that later on. In terms of concealment, it's a pretty low profile machine, so the concealment values are fairly respectable, though these are not the best that you are going to find on a tank destroyer. And bear in mind that my particular crew here are not really packing that much in the way of camouflage skill, focusing more on repairs. Spotting wise, well, the base view range of this thing is 360 meters, which is a bit naff. Mine is at 368 at the moment because I have a full Brothers in Arms crew. So the view range is not very good, and if you're going to make the most of it, you're probably looking at using binocular telescopes, unfortunately. So, let's have a quick look at the grind and then we'll have a look at the gun. So if you have a look at the Soviet tech tree, we're up here on the Object 704 at tier 9. This is from the, I guess, the original Soviet tank destroyer branch. You work your way up through these lower tier machines, which are generally actually fairly decent, up to tier 6, at which point the line splits, and up here to the Su-152 at tier 7. And this is where well, I guess it's at tier 6 really that the line starts to take on its personality proper. The Su-100 has some armour to work with and has the option of mounting some pretty big scary guns. The Su-152 takes the 152mm howitzer, a gun you can also use on the ISU-152, though the ISU's main gun, or top gun shall we say, is the D4S. Used to be the BL-10, that was subsequently changed, but still a pretty decent gun. I found the ISU in particular to be quite campy and it's sort of boring for me, but your mileage may vary. Bear in mind when I played it, it still had around about 1,000 hit points and still packed the BL-10 gun. When you get up here to the Object 704, well, let's have a look at what's going to be available for you and what isn't. The top suspension, obviously, you're not going to have. Suspension is always unique to the tank. The top engine carries over from the ISU-152, so you should already have that unlocked. The top radio, if anyone cares, is used on a variety of different machines from about tier 7 upwards, though notably this is the first tank on this tank line to use that top radio. The intermediate radio is unlocked on the Su-152 at tier 7, so you're probably going to have this intermediate radio rather than the top radio, but you certainly don't want to prioritise the radios. This is a tank destroyer, it's all about that boomstick. So, you have a 152mm howitzer that if you have got any common sense whatsoever, you will never have to touch. And you will never have to touch because you already have the D4S from the ISU-152. 3.45 rounds a minute, not particularly impressive. 750 alpha damage is really where the gun shines. 260 penetration is still perfectly usable at tier 9. And I really wouldn't worry about packing too much in the way of premium ammunition because 292 penetration isn't that much of an upgrade over 260 if we're going to be honest. Though I guess it might be useful here or there, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. The moneymaker though is this BL-10 152mm gun, 3.15 rounds per minute rate of fire, which sounds bad, but when you bear in mind, or when you compare this gun with other tier 9 tank destroyer guns of a similar caliber, actually 3.51 rounds a minute makes this one of the better guns out there. 286mm of penetration, even with regular armor piercing, means that I have never touched the premium ammunition on this tank. 329mm of penetration with APCR, but honestly, that's not that impressive for premium rounds. Usually the premium rounds on tier 9 and 10 medium tanks are sort of packing that kind of penetration. On a tank destroyer you'd expect it to be more, but I've never felt the need to press that 2 key with 286mm of penetration with your regular rounds. That is a lot. Also worth noting, decent HE rounds, 90 pen, 950 alpha damage, so for those more lightly armoured targets, a HE round here or two can actually be quite useful. Dispersion at 100 meters of 0.39 is not massively impressive, but remember this is a big old gun and that is an improvement over the ISU's gun characteristics at tier 8. 2.9 second aim time, very similar comments. It's not great, but given the size of the gun, it's also not completely terrible. So, this is, all things considered, actually a pretty good gun, but it's a Soviet tank destroyer gun. I mean, you're getting the penetration and the alpha damage. The other stats are not great, but in the context of the caliber of the gun, they're not bad. The thing is, it means this gun can let you down, and of course one stat you don't see in the garage is shell velocity, which isn't fantastic on this weapon. So personally, I find the BL-10 here on the Object a frustrating gun to use, but all things considered, the gun itself I don't usually have massive complaints with. Let's have a look at crew skills and equipment, and I should also probably mention the gun traverse arc here. It's 11 degrees if memory serves either way, indeed it is, so the gun traverse arc is not that wide, it's relatively narrow, which can be a problem, especially when you combine that with the slightly sluggish traverse speed, meaning you really don't want to get outflanked in this thing. So, in terms of equipment, I ran a large caliber tank gun rammer because why wouldn't you want that? Improved vents just to all round improve the performance of the tank, and then you kind of have some options. Personally, I use binocular telescopes to try and pimp out that view range as much as possible. Yeah, optics, 10% of 360 meter base view range, they don't really cut it if I'm going to be honest. The other option would really, I guess, be an enhanced gun laying drive to try and improve your aim time, though I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Camouflage net you could go with, though I would personally recommend you take binos over. The camo net is just a slightly more useful choice for your team and gives you the flexibility to spot if you so wish. Crew skills, 6th sense on the commander, safe storage on a loader, nothing too surprising. I've then gone for repairs. You're up here at tier 9, you have a decent slug of health, and the armour on the 704 isn't terrible. So I think repairs is the more important skill than camouflage on this tank. Brothers in Arms is of course also very useful. I've also got clutch braking because that traverse speed is a bit ugh, so try and make that better where possible. And I have a couple of crew members working on camo skill here. Once they've done the other bits and bobs. Ammunition wise, I carry 2 rounds of HE, 2 of APCR, and the other 26 rounds of ammunition I had as armor piercing. If I'm gonna be honest, I mean, I never fired a single round of APCR, and I didn't fire that many HE rounds. Most of the time you'll be firing regular armor piercing ammo, which is absolutely fine. 1650 credits per shot might sound expensive, but do bear in mind you're doing 750 damage every time you push that button. So, yeah, it's not too bad. Consumables, I've got your standard 3. I know a lot of people would swap out the fire extinguisher for an automatic one, fair enough. You might go for large versions of either of the 2 as well. There's also, of course, extra combat rations, removed speed governors and all that jazz, but they tend to be items that if you're going to use, you probably use on most of your tanks anyway, and you're already aware of that. Personally, I don't, but that's just me. With all that said and done, the only thing left to really mention about this tank are module locations, and there's nothing too surprising here. All your crew are going to be in this fighting compartment, with your engine and fuel tank situated towards the rear. Nothing hugely surprising there to take anyone off guard. So let's go and have a quick look at the armor profile of this tank, and then I'll show you some gameplay. Right then, let's take a look at this armor profile then. We'll start off having a look at the rear armor, because why not? Rear armor is 60mm, it's nothing to really shout about. Yeah, there is actually a section that is 30mm if for whatever reason 60mm are a problem. And actually this means that you can penetrate the rear of this tank with a lot of high explosive rounds. If you aim at this rectangular section here, let's just switch back to the visual model and hopefully I'll be able to point it out for you. No, not hybrid, I said visual, you silly sausage. See this plate here? This is just 30mm. So, if you get the rear of an Object 704, you can put HE rounds through that section. Side of the tank, well, you're looking at 90mm on the bottom section behind the tracks. 90mm also up here, but with some angling going on, so that means the effective armor on this section is greater. And here, of course, you have spaced armor coming into the mix as well, so that even flat on, the effective armor here is sort of around about 180mm. What this means is that if you angle this tank and people aren't careful with their shots, they can start getting some significant bounces, though do bear in mind if you're angling the tank like this, this section is going to become weaker. From the front, head on, you have these 2 shoulder sections, which at least frontally are pretty strong. The lower front plate is 100mm thick, but this is a low profile tank, so you are sometimes shooting down on the lower plate if that's what you're going for, but even with that you're going to struggle to get the lower plate too much above about 175mm of effective armor, which is around about the same you get on the upper plate, unfortunately. 120mm here, so thicker but worse angle, meaning that upper front plate of this tank is around about 160, 170 effective armor. Even if you try and angle it, you're going to struggle to get much above about 175, which means in practice a lot of tier 8 tanks and some tier 7 tanks can just shoot straight through your frontal plate, even before we start looking at tier 9 and 10, to whom like 170 armor is pathetic. So bear that in mind. Gun mantlet. Well, you've got a section here below the gun which is just made of nope, don't bother shooting that, there's no point. Most of the gun mantlet is pretty good and you can get some fairly insane values here. So most of the time I have found if you're going to get a bounce on the front of the tank, it is off the gun mantlet. If someone's shooting on the frontal plate itself, probably not so much. I find it interesting, some time ago I remember watching a review from Quickie Baby on this tank and he called it the most heavily armoured tier 9 tank destroyer in the game, which struck me as somewhat bizarre given that the T95 is a thing, but never mind, there we go. The armour on this tank, generally speaking, isn't to be relied upon, but it will generally bounce a shot or maybe two every game, sort of thing. So when you do get those bounces, run with it. It's lovely when it happens, take advantage of it, but don't rely on the armour all the time. Anyway, let's show you some gameplay and hopefully you can see what I'm talking about. Here we go then, kicking off with a top tier game, and I should put a big caveat on this now, of course. With the current matchmaker, when I say top tier here, you do have to treat that with a little bit of suspicion. This is a tier 9 maximum game. This is not 357 matchmaking though, so this isn't actually the very best matchmaking you can get in the Object 704, because there are 5 tier 9s on each team as opposed to 3, and there are no tier 7s for us to shoot at. But honestly, shooting tier 7s, and if you're in the ISU 152, shooting tier 6s with this gun doesn't really feel colossally fair. So, never mind. This is a tier 9 maximum match, and we're just having a look, both teams, to see what sort of tanks are probably going to give us issues. This is an assault match here on the Siegfried line. We're on the defending team, as you can see. So on the enemy team, they have got an ML2, and oh god, we've been spotted already, an ML2, WZ111 1-4, Leopard prototype, Waffle Thrower, and the T49 as their top tier tanks. And I guess the VK101P should also get a mention as a tank that can be a pain in the what's-it. On our team, we've got an ML2, same, Mauschen, Skoda T50, myself in the Object 704, and an RU251. So, just to kick proceedings off with, we are being a little campy, and we're being a little campy because, well, A, the enemy have to come to us, but B, also, I found if you are too aggressive in the Object 704, that's a very good way to get your face planted, because I think there's a habit, or I found I had a habit of going, right, I have better armour than the ISU 152, let's be more aggressive with it, and the end result of that was, well, I ended up being too aggressive, and whilst you have better armour than the ISU 152, that doesn't mean you have great armour, so do be aware of that. So we're starting off being a little cautious, just making sure that we're not going to throw our top tier tank away right at the beginning of the match. That would be a bad plan. And you can see already our FCM, 59 Patton and M4A1 Revelorice have pushed over the ridgeline, and they are just taking the field, which is great for us because it limits it gives us map control. It limits where the enemy can be. It means that we aren't too worried about taking flanking fire from their tier 9 waffle thrower or anything like that. Now the reason I wanted to show you this match is that we're top tier, and this isn't going to be, if memory serves, a particularly campy game. We've got a town here, the enemy team do get into it, and we end up having to get stuck into the town ourselves in order to defend it. So whilst I said you do have to be a little careful with this machine, and you can't afford to be too aggressive with it, by the same token also don't camp at the back of the map. I mean, you know, swings and roundabouts, you do what is needed of you at the time for that situation. Our team are currently 1-3 down, and one of those tanks that we've lost is one of our top tiers. Of course, the enemy have also lost their T49. So we're just waiting here for a moment just to see if our FCM is going to find anything that we can shoot at. Not quite, so we're pushing up to try and get some shots in on those enemy tanks who appear to be sitting on the red line at the back of the map. Although we're actually rewarded with the tier 9 waffle thrower just here, aiming in. Kind of wish we had the high explosive round loaded there. But as it is, we get a high damage roll and hit him for 814, so it's all good. Emil 2 away in the distance, trying to see if we can get a shot in on him. Unfortunately, we didn't really lead that shot by enough, and that does miss. Remember, the accuracy on this gun is not fantastic. Looks like this guy might have got himself caught on the dragon's teeth a bit. If that's the case, we're going to try and take advantage of it. Not sure if that one hit or not, though it looked like it may well have done so, which would be good. Lorraine, 40 ton then. We might go with a blind shot on this guy, but we're not rewarded with anything. If we'd have hit him and damaged him, we'd have killed him, but c'est la vie. And there's the Rheinmetall Borsig. Now I'm sticking with the armor piercing here because although there are some lightly armored targets over there that we're shooting at, I think the armor piercing is just going to more reliably do damage at this point. Binos up just to see if we can spot anything. Doesn't look like that's going to be the case. Scoreline is 4-5 at the moment. 5-5, so it's not going 5-6, so not going too badly. CDC coming up on our left-hand side, a friendly CDC, and oh dear, this game is taking a slightly sudden turn. However, CDC manages to spot out El Borsigo, which means we might be able to do something about El Borsigo if we're very lucky. There we go. Low damage roll this time, which is kind of frustrating, meaning we don't pick up the kill on the Borsig, but I guess we rolled for 814 against the Waffle Thrower, so rolling for 615 against the Borsig isn't too hideously unfair, and we are able to polish off the Charioteer. And he becomes our first kill, and that's 1859 damage done in 3 shots, which isn't too shabby. Now there's still a Borsig out there, there's still an ML2, both of them are perfectly capable of doing damage to us, and the artillery, who splashes us there. We're just letting our repair crew put the tracks back on, not going to use a repair kit there because I'm pretty sure I wasn't actually spotted, and I want to save the repair kit for another time. Also, we're not getting rid of the crew stun there because once again, I didn't think there was an immediate danger of bad things happening. Borsig, we take the shot, but we're not rewarded with a hit this time round. Our 59 Patton, however, is moving up and finding these guys for us. There goes the Borsig. Can we do something about the ML2? Yes, we can. Only 34 damage, but takes a fairly dangerous tank out of the match. So, first bit of this game, we have been playing your sort of traditional tank destroyer. The only shot that's come our way was from artillery, and you're not going to end up bouncing arty anyway. And yeah, we've just been providing supporting fire. However, we're now getting to kind of the gubbins of this match, shall we say. There are 5 tanks left on our team, 6 left on the enemy team, and we're going to have to thin their numbers if we want any chance of winning. With that in mind, I am coming up here to try and do something about these fellows. Hello, Mr. WZ. That was a tier 9 heavy tank. We put an armor-piercing shell through his upper frontal plate, even an angle that would have been favourable to him, because 286mm of penetration with your regular AP rounds will do that to people. So he becomes our 3rd kill, and we've just made it over 2,000 damage at this point. Scoreline has now gone the other way, 11-10 in our favour. Just seeing what else we can do. So that was the WZ dealt with. We know there's the Super Pershing over to our right-hand side. Is this Super Pershing going to be a silly sausage? As it is, well, he takes a shot at our frontal plate. Whereabouts did he hit? There we go, straight into the gun mantlet. That was never going to penetrate. Bounces off us there, and the 59 Patton covers us and manages to take out the Super Pershing. So there's a VK and a T-44-100 left on the enemy team. Let's see if we can do something about either of those guys. Going the long way round here on the basis that hopefully we can catch the VK from behind, and we might be able to do something about the T-44 in the process. Looks like the T-44 is going to make it into cover, unfortunately, before we are. Artillery hits him though, so there's a little bit of spotting damage. And for some reason the VK is firing high explosive, so he does 36 to us and we do 878 to him. And now, if he's just going to come around the corner, we're going to do something about him into the commander's hatch. Not because the commander's hatch is particularly a weak point on that tank, but again, when you're packing 286mm of penetration, I mean, yeah. Another bounce there as well. Having taken a second HE round from the VK, I don't know why, like, if that VK had been firing armor piercing, then that could have been, what, 880 hit points that we were now missing. Anyway, we managed to take out that T-44-100. He damages us, he's firing APCR, not really too much we can do about that. And we do take a little bit of damage from our friendly artillery, which is slightly annoying, but there we go. However, we're able to pick up our 5th kill there to finish the game off. So, let's go and have a look at the post-battle stats for this one. So, that game ended up being enough for First Class Mastery, Fighter, Duelist, Fire for Effect, and we got a Brothers in Arms medal as well, as we ended up platooning with that friendly ML2. We actually ended up doing more damage than we saw in game, which means we must have hit at least one of those blind shots. The ML2 finished on the top of our team with 4,702 damage, 3 kills and 1,219 base XP, and we were second with 4,446 damage done, 5 kills and 1,135 base XP. Shout out should go to the enemy, well, T-44-100, yes, he was firing APCR, but whatever, he still managed 2,500 damage, and the WZ over 4,000 damage from him was a good effort. 12 shots fired, 9 hits, 9 penetrations for that damage count, most of which was actually from close range, and if we just rewind a bit, we'll notice that we hit a shot here on the ML2. Now, the only one that we hit while the ML was visible was the killing shot, so we managed to hit. There was one blind shot we took that looked like it was on target, and it did indeed connect. 5 hits received, 3 penetrated, 2 did not, for 490 damage blocked by our armour. Nothing too special, but kept us alive a little bit longer. And actually, if you look at the amount of health we were left with at the end of that game, if the enemy VK had been firing armor piercing rather than high explosive, and if our armor hadn't bounced those shots, we probably would have died at the end of the game there, so there is that. 7 enemy vehicles damaged, 5 of them destroyed, 355 assistance damage, and just over 2 kilometers travelled. Now, the shells are quite expensive, well over 1,000 credits per shell, and after firing 12 of them, we spent almost 20,000 credits. However, even with a standard account, we made a profit for that game, so not the end of the world. Times 4 experience for the first win of the day there, bit of an unusual multiplier. Oh no, that wasn't times 4, sorry, I'm just being thick. It was something else. Some sort of multiplier, I can't be bothered to work out what it is, probably times 3 by the look of it. So we ended up with a reasonable amount of experience as well. So there we go, there was a quote-unquote top tier match for you. Let's go and jump into one where we are not at the top of the feeding pool. Here we are then, it's a tier 10 maximum match and it is 357 matchmaking. If we have a look at the tanks available on both teams, well, we can see how useful our armour's likely to be. The tier 10s on both teams are a pair of tank destroyers. Each team has a Grilla 15 and then the enemy have a Stridsvagn 103B and we have a Death Star. I should point out that this replay is taken from prior to the introduction of the Badger. So this is when the Death Star was the regular tier 10 British tank destroyer. Not that that really makes any difference for the purposes of this replay, but I thought I'd mention it anyway. We're on the Abbey map as well, which is one of my least favourite maps in the game. God, I hate this thing. And just at the beginning of the match, I decide to try and be a little, well, campy and try and see if I can get a shot into any of the guys who might be spotted over yonder. And you might be thinking to yourself, Chip, you had a shot at an AMX CDC and you didn't take it. Why didn't you take it? Very simply, because as I am sufficiently far enough behind these bushes to maintain my camouflage, that I couldn't see the outlines of the friendly tanks. I didn't know quite where the friendlies were, and so I thought by taking a shot at the AMX CDC, I stood a significant risk of shooting one of my allies in the back, and with a gun this big, they would not appreciate it. We are able to get a shot on the CDC, or one of the CDCs, in the end though. Low damage roll, 606. It's not often you say 606 is a low damage roll, and I don't just mean a little bit low, it's very low. But there we go. Go for a bit of a chancy shot on the side of the turret on the AMX this time. No joy. But you can see here, with the rate of fire on this gun, whilst it's not absolutely fantastic, for those of you who've played tanks like the T-30, you might notice it is significantly better than those machines, and we are actually rewarded with the kill on the AMX in the end. And a little bit of assistance damage onto the WZ as well. Gotta love those binos for the extra bit of experience. So we're up to 1162 damage done, 175 assistance, and so 177, I have eyes, promise, and 1 kill. So not a terrible start to the match, and we have the first kill for our team, and our team does promptly then lose its IS-3. C'est la vie. But this position has kind of outstayed its usefulness, so we're going to relocate. And on this map, I'm not going to the 8 or 9 lines because they are frigging useless, but also because it looks like it wouldn't be needed. We're going to go over to the 1 and 2 lines. Really, the Abbey in the centre of the map and the 1 and 2 lines are the areas that tend to control this map. From those 1 and 2 lines you can push, or you can go back to your base and defend it when necessary. So I'm going up there to help out my allies deal with those bad guys. The enemy have a reasonable presence over there, so the addition of a big fat gun like mine should be fairly useful. Here you can see the mobility of the tank. It's not slow, but it's not lightning quick. It is kind of fast, heavy tank sort of levels of mobility. You can see here we're happily chunking along at basically our speed limit, 36, 37 kilometers an hour. But as I say, the traverse on the tank is fantastic. So, T-54E1 is fighting our E-50 and Guerrilla 15. Not sure how long he's going to last, but even though you might look at that guy and go, he's only a tier 9 with not great penetration, he's still capable of doing a very respectable amount of damage with that 4-round 105mm autoloader. Guerrilla 15 is over to my right hand side, so I do need to be careful about that fellow. Hello, Mr. T-54. And, you know, I was mentioning that gun can be kind of frustrating to use. There we go. Didn't really have an opportunity to fully aim that shot, but thought the guy's, you know, a pretty decent target. I doubt I'll miss this, but as it was, we did end up missing it. Although, having said that, we then blocked his return shot and put one of ours straight through his angled upper front plate. Regular armor piercing, no premium ammunition. That's just what 286mm of penetration looks like on your regular AP rounds. So, pushing around this corner, if I take a hit, it's fine. I have the health. I really want some of these guys to die. It'd be really nice if someone didn't nudge me. But there we go. We're still able to pick up a kill on the Tier 9 American autoloader. Scoreline is 6-8. It was down at 4-8 at one point, by the way. So, this match is not a foregone conclusion. RE50 takes out their T-54, and that basically appears to just leave a Lorraine 40T wondering where all his friends were. Never mind. And that leaves this flank cleared out. We're up to 2,500 damage done ourselves, and 2 kills, which is fairly nice so far. Moving around, see if I can get a shot maybe into that Scorpion, perhaps. That would be nice. Is he going to give us a shot? Maybe, although I decide against it. Nah, it's awkward where he is. There's kind of a wall in the way. So I end up not taking the shot, which is a little bit of a shame, but never mind. Guerrilla 15 takes out our Primo Victoria, and hello, Mr. Scorpion. Now we get to finish him off, and he becomes kill number 3, which is nice. Scoreline is 10-9, so our team has managed to claw this back, so that the scorelines are relatively even. Now, that Guerrilla is potentially going to be a nuisance in the Abbey, but at the moment there isn't a huge amount we can do about it. So we are just going to push on towards the enemy base and see if we can put any shots towards those enemy, well, mainly tank destroyers, though there's a T-44 over there as well. Our Batchat is reloading his magazine, and of course in support of me I've also got a Conway, Guerrilla 15 and an E50. So let's just see what we can do. Worth bearing in mind, of course, because this game is taken from before the changes to the British tank destroyer line, that Conway is using the 120mm gun. It's the only gun on that tank. He is not using the bigger weapon, so that's something worth bearing in mind. Seeing what we can do here, there's a Tortoise. See if we can get a shot into this Torty and really spoil his day. Someone else does. We follow suit. 747 is pretty close to an average damage roll. And it turns out that the friendly Death Star over there is on full health. he says, just as the guy loses literally 2/3 of his health. So that was nice, up until the point where it wasn't anymore. There we go. Gorilla 15 appears that he's going to kind of make a bit of a move here, so we're going to see if we can do anything about him. Sticking with the armor piercing, the thing with using high explosive in this situation is whilst it would do more damage to the gorilla is kind of behind a wall, and armor piercing can punch through the wall, whereas high explosive can't. Ooh, we even get a little bit of assistance on the guy, which is nice. So screw it, we're going to push around and try and take out this gorilla, because otherwise he can shoot us in the flank, which is bad. Once he's dead, then we can worry about the other two tank destroyers. I do get spotted. Ooh, and the gorilla is now almost dead, which is quite nice. But seeing what we can do about this chap. Ugh. That was a terrible shot. Coming to the extent of my gun traverse, but that was an awful shot either way. So the gorilla is still alive, though our E50 is able to change that. Stilitzwang and a Tortoise remaining. Tortoise we can take out with one shot. If we take a hit from him, it's not the end of the world. It's the Stilitzwang I am currently more concerned about. We don't know exactly where that guy is. Oh, he's over to our right-hand side. So I'm just highlighting on the map where I think the guy is. And he actually bounced that shot on me, which is quite entertaining. So, at this point, we could go and try and hunt that Stilitzwang down, but he's fast, he's camouflaged, he's all of those things that make it a pain in the neck to hunt people down. He also has a very good gun. Alternatively, we can just cap. And actually, let's just take a quick look at our tank to see where the armor has held up, because we haven't lost any hit points this match. One shot went into our gun mantlet. Yeah, that's never going to bounce. Never going to pen. That was the T-54. And then the Stilitzwang shot went into our sides, but that's where we have spaced armor, so our spaced armor saved us. Speaking of the Stilitzwang, there he is. Can we possibly pick up a kill on the guy? No, we can't. Instead, we get hit in the face, and our E50 gets the ram kill. I'm totally fine with that. It's always fun to see someone pick up a kill by ramming them. So there we go. That was the tier 10 match. As it was, we didn't really encounter too many of the enemy tier 10s. One of them was an artillery at the end of the day, I guess. Then there was the gorilla and the Stilitzwang, so we didn't do a great deal to either of them, but we still had a pretty decent match. So, let's go and have a look at the post-battle stats for this game. That game then was enough for fire for effect and a second class mastery. We finished second on our team with 3,250 damage done, 3 kills, 984 base experience, and our E50 there had a pretty decent match. On the enemy team, their team was topped by tier 8s. Not normally a good sign, as it tends to indicate their top tier tanks did not have a good impact on that match, but there we go. 9 shots fired, 6 hits, 6 penetrations for that damage count. Most of it was actually from fairly close range. 3 hits received, 1 pen, 2 didn't for 710 damage blocked by our armour. 5 enemy vehicles damaged, 3 destroyed, 888 assistance damage, love that number. 6 capture points, 2.2 kilometers travelled, and even though we had to pay out almost 15,000 credits in ammunition, with a standard account we still made a profit, so there we go. Let's just jump back into the garage to round things off. So, what are my overall thoughts on this machine? Well, I can see why people like it. You get a tank with good enough mobility, armour that is enough to bounce a shot here or there, a respectable hit point pool, and at the end of the day you get a 152mm gun poking out the front, which does tend to offend, but it is not my cup of tea, I'm going to be honest. I prefer this thing to the ISU 152 at tier 8, sure, definitely true, but it's just not really my thing. The armour isn't really reliable. I mean, we talked about it when we were looking at the armour, but the frontal plate, a lot of tier 8s and some tier 7s can just shoot straight through. Let's not even talk about higher tier tanks. So the only armour you can really sort of rely on is your side armour, but because you don't have the turret, you can't really use your side armour that effectively if you want to shoot anything, though you can use it in between shots, and I find this tank quite awkward, I guess, and a bit campy, because ultimately at the end of the day it is still, whilst calling it a glass cannon isn't, that's slightly overstating it, it is really the gun that this tank is about. It's really about that 152mm gun. And when you have a tank that's really all about the gun, you're probably going to spend a lot of your time camping. I mean, you don't have a turret. You're not mobile or agile enough to survive on your own for a long period of time, because if you face two opponents, they'll just get round your sides. One opponent will probably get round your sides if you're at close range. So yeah, it's not my cup of tea, but I can understand why it would be people's, and I definitely prefer it to the ISU 152 at tier 8. Of course, I guess bear in mind 750 alpha damage is still nice, but it's not as hideous and painful as it was at tier 8. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Your mileage may vary. This is the sort of thing you get, though, if you're going up this particular Soviet tank destroyer line. The Object 704, sorry, is pretty indicative of the whole bunch of them. There we go. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that review, possibly even found it vaguely informative. If you did, by all means, feel free to go and catch some of my other reviews or game videos, and enjoy whatever it is you are doing, and I shall catch you guys in another video. Ciao, ciao.